Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. A belated good yontif. Yesterday was Chamisha Asa B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah Leilones. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Pashas Yisro. So immediately we're going straight from Rosh Hashanah Leilones to Erev Shabbos Kodesh Pashas Yisro and Pashas Yisro. So what is the connection? And what is the lesson? And before we start, since the war started, we added tzedakah, gdelet tzedakah shemakareves sageula, Mashiach now, Am Yisrael Chai. Then we say, as usual, a prayer. You have to daven. Today I'm going to speak about it's a pasuk, a beginning of a pasuk, which is talking about when Mashiach will come, and it's also a prayer. And it's directly related to the theme, what we're going to be speaking about today, which is the number one topic on the lips and mouth of every single Yid this week, and that is the hostages. So first, we'll say the pasuk and prayer, V'shov Hashem elikecho es shivuzcho. It's a pasuk in Chumash Dvarim, where it says, Hashem will bring back your exiles. Rashi says a tremendous, profound thought over here. That Hashem will bring back the ones who are in exile, which means Hashem is the one who's returning those who are in exile. But since it says V'shav Hashem alikecha, it seems that Hashem Himself also returns. And it says over here, Abiseinu lomdu mikan kavi yochel shashchina shruye misrael. The Eibishter is with the Yidden, B'tzaras Galusam, in the oppression and the troubles and the suffering of their exile. Uchshenegolin, Hichtiv Geula La'atzmai, Shehu Yoshuv Imoim. So the Eibishter in the Torah ascribed himself being redeemed together with the Yidden, because where the Yidden are, that is where he is. And here we come to the heart of what Golus is all about, really. In addition to the physical suffering and the oppression and the horrific persecution and oppression of Yidden throughout the history of our nation, generally speaking, there's also another concept where really we have to discuss this, and that's what's really going on, and it's related to this week's parsha. In this week's parsha, we have the Aseres Hadibros, the 10 Commandments. One of the 10 Commandments is the prohibition for kidnapping. As the pasuk says, this is the 8th of the Aseres Hadibros. There's lois, it's in the pasuk, kapitel Chof, pasuk Yud Gimel, lois sirtzach, you should not kill, lois sinov, you should not commit adultery, and lois signov, you shall not steal. And Rashi over here learns pshat, that what is it talking about? Begoiniv nefoshois hakosov medaber. The verse speaks of one who kidnaps people. Anyways, see Rashi over there. So according to Rashi, over here we learn out, and this is from the 10 Commandments, and this applies also to non-Jews. It's one of the Sheva mitzvahs. You're not allowed to kidnap a person. So I mentioned just previously, that the hot topic right now, and the thing which we've had our hearts and minds on for the past year and a bit, is about the hostages. And Hashem should end the ordeal, the suffering, this second Mashiach now. Nevertheless, as we mentioned last week, that a true Jew understands that everything has to start from himself. In a certain sense, does it make a difference if you listen to the news and you get lost in the news and you get involved in the news? This is happening now, that happened yesterday, what's happening tomorrow? Since Trump appeared in the scene, things have become hyperventilated. It's going wild. Every day there's another story which is connected to Israel. Now we understand everyone's involvement and everyone's interest and everyone's curiosity, and it's mamish, my brother, my sister, true. But nevertheless, there is a limit to how much you could accomplish by getting more involved. Get involved, listen to the news every day for 5 minutes to know what's going on, because how could it be any otherwise? But if you really, really want to make a change, and you really, really want to understand what's going on over here, we have to look inward, because that is the truth. In the end of the day, things are operating and existing on many levels, and there's no question about it. As far as I am concerned, Yaakov ben Bluma, there's no question about it that whatever is happening in Yisro, besides for its thing that's importance for the history of the nation, besides how it fits into the whole story of the Seder Shtalshalos and Hashgacha Pratis and divine plan, which permeates and works out on every single level, global, physical, celestial, universe, you name it. In the end of the day, as far as the individual is concerned, B'shvili nivra elam, there's a question I have to ask myself: what difference is it making in my life, in my betterment, in my improvement, by the fact that I know that this hostage is Hashem Yerachem? Am I saying an extra capital Tillim every day? Am I improving myself every day? And what does it mean? What does it mean? So, from this pasuk where it says V'sham Hashem Alikecha Shvuscha, and I mentioned kidnapping, the truth is, some of it is my own theories. In a certain way, the metaphor, the analogy for Golus is not murder. Chas v'shalom, the Rebbe Shtopid, not one Jew should ever get murdered ever. And one day Hashem will explain why people were murdered. And murder is the worst thing, because as they say, with his hope there's life. With his life there's hope. As long as a person's alive, there's hope that things could get better. But if someone's over, lights out, game over, so even though the neshama lives on forever, but nevertheless, that's the gravest sin. But, on the other hand, when we speak about Golus, we speak not about the idea of death, chas v'shalom, because the truth is, there's no such a thing as death in spirituality. So the metaphor for Golus, according to what I'm understanding, is the idea of exile. That's what Golus means, exile. What's the idea of exile in spirituality? That means, as we'll discuss today, and that's why we compare Golus and the idea of the persecutions that are happening to the Jewish people as being in captivity, a hostage, kidnapped by the other side. So let's take it step by step. The Alter Rebbe, in chapter 17 of the Tanya, and also in chapter 19, speaks about this concept. So first we'll speak about chapter 19, and then we'll go back to 17. In chapter 19, he speaks about two levels, but the Rebbe adds a third level. There's one level where we say that the neshama, the hispashtus, the extension, the expansion of what he calls chokhmah of the nefesh, which is a very high level, is in a state of sleep, slumber. Then he says there's a lower level, there's a level where, there's a lower level which is called that it's in Golus, it's in exile, but then there's a higher level where we say that it's asleep. So what's the difference when we say Golus, exile, he says, is in the extension of Chachma. Again, Golus, the lowest level, is only in the expansion and the extension of Chachma. But he says that the Etzema Chachma, the Chachma itself, can never be called in a state of Golus, exile, but in a state of asleep. Then the Rebbe says there's a level which is even higher than the Chachma, where we say, Ani Yeshena v'libi er. The pasuk says, I was asleep, but my heart was awake. And that's the essence of the soul itself. So in other words, there comes out there's three levels. There's a level where your soul, a level of your soul, the expansion, the extension, his pashtos of Chachma, is in a level of exile. Then there's a higher level, which is not as bad. You're not in a state of exile, but you're in a state of being asleep. And then there's the highest level, as usual, Chassidus always has the redemptive angle, where you're alive, you're active, you're air, you're awake, you're alert. You're stimulated. You're aroused. So what are these three levels? First, let's understand what it means in Avodah. And that's what it means that a person has to look always inside himself, to always examine himself and examine his motives, that he's always bringing out his better self. And we have to understand the stakes that are involved. So let's start at the lowest level, which is what I want to discuss today. What does it mean that I am being a captive? I've been hijacked. I've been kidnapped. I'm a hostage to my lesser self. What does that mean? So there's one level where you're asleep, that's Shena, and then there's another level where you're in exile. What's the difference? Being asleep means that you have a person, he has qualities, he has advantages, he's so talented, he has creativity, he has consciousness. But when he's asleep, we say you can't tell the difference between an animal and a human. They're lying horizontal, and the head and the feet are equal. So usually we say a person stands erect and his head is on top and his feet are on the bottom. And not only that, he can do su'umori menechem. He can lift up his head. He can be searching for truth, searching for getting involved in something greater than himself. He's a seeker. He yearns for spirituality. He aspires for higher. But then what happens is, when he's asleep, that's it. We can't tell his superiority. We can't tell what makes him different. This is an animal who lives for food, and this is a human being that his life is dedicated for food. He, instead of eating to live, he lives to eat, for example. So then you say, such a person, in a way, he's asleep. We can't see any of his qualities. We can't see any of his advantage. We can't see how he's channeling all the talents that were God-given to him for a higher purpose. That's the level of asleep. But the thing is, when a person's asleep, it doesn't mean that his energies and his knowledge and his talents are being twisted, perverted, and warped and hijacked by the enemy. And that's what it means, when someone's in exile, and how Chassidus explains when you do something wrong, so then the chayes, the energy that you used, or the energy, the powers that were given to you, are now being channeled the wrong direction. That means that the enemy has now kidnapped your resources, your energy, your electricity, call it whatever you want, and they're using it. And that's the most dangerous thing, and that's the worst thing. And the point is, in a way, the higher you are, the more danger you can cause for the other side when it's not channeled correctly. I don't want to elaborate about the negative, but let's give it an analogy of a soldier. So one second. Number one, just like in the physical sense, when a person's a hostage or a captive, so then they could torture the person, Hashem Yirachem, etc., etc. We're not talking about that. Let's now talk about the concept. So the concept is, imagine you have a person who's in the army. You have a person who's in the army, and he could be a private, he could be a captain, he could be a corporal, he could be a major, he could be a colonel, he could be a general. Now, the higher you are in your rank, so they could use the knowledge that you have, because you have a clearance for intelligence, that if you're a captain, you have this level of clearance. If you're a major, you have this level of clearance. And that's the way it works, literally. The higher your position is, the more you have classified information that, if God forbid it fell into the wrong hands, would be the greatest catastrophe. Now imagine you're beyond all that. You're the prince, the only child of the king, who knows it's not only about the information that you have in your head, the entire future kingdom is in you. If something happens to you, the entire continuation of the kingdom is at threat. Now this is the pshat, according to Yiddishkeit, according to Chassidus. Every time a Yid, Hashem Yirachem, is in the wrong direction, that means that the powers, the energy, the infinity, the Elokus itself that's in the Yid, is now being channeled in the wrong direction. That's what it means, Golus Hashchina. And this is what the Alter Rebbe says. Let's go back to chapter 17, where he speaks about what does it mean to do tshuva. And the Alter Rebbe says that the level of tshuva means tshuva tata. Why is it called the lower level of tshuva? And he says, Lahalois hei tata lakima minifilosa shenafla elachitzayin, which means in every single one of us there's a spark of the Eibishter. That's the hei tata. And when we go in the wrong place, Kaviyachal, we're dragging the energy of Hashem, the divinity, in the wrong direction. And what does it mean to do tshuva? To extract whatever powers or energies that were previously going in the wrong direction, and empowering the enemy, so to speak, gets now returned to the proper place. And not only that, you need the tzedek aliyah, obviously it becomes better. I don't want to elaborate now on all the concepts, but you could say in the end of chapter 17, the Alter Rebbe says that he finishes with the words that he koma menifilosa v'gam nitzova. Why does the Alter Rebbe have to say not only arises, but stands firm? Because he wants to bring out that after the fall, it doesn't just rise, it stands firm, it's firmer than before. Anyways, let's get back to looking at ourselves. Each one of us is looking inside ourselves and being very, very careful that our perspectives, our ashkafas, our mind, your mind is a very precious thing. The mind of a Jew, a Yiddish cup. Don't let it become contaminated. Don't let it become twisted. Don't let it become warped, that it starts speaking ideas or perceptions that are not al pi Torah. That means then you're using Jewish energy, Jewish kaiches, and it's going in the wrong direction. And that's what it means goes. So we have to be very careful. Each one of us in our avodas Hashem has to always be careful when it comes to our minds and our hearts, that it shouldn't be captured, enamored by things that are secularized in essence. Let us, our minds and hearts, be captured by the truth of the Torah. Shabbos Pashas Yisro, the Shabbos of Matan Torah. We have to reaffirm our allegiance to the perspectives of Torah, the Ashkafa of Torah, and more drench our brains and our hearts with Torah ideology. That's the opposite of allowing ourselves to become kidnapped by the secularism of the world. So that's Golus. Shina, we already explained. So let's go back to chapter 19. There's one level where you're in exile. That means that Jewish power, Jewish energy is being channeled in the wrong direction, because if they kidnap the colonel, they can give him an injection, he can reveal secrets that could cause damage like you cannot imagine, etc. The same thing is with a Jew. When a Jew is doing something which is not right, that means very powerful forces are being now transformed and twisted in the wrong direction, which is the worst thing possible. Then there's being asleep, which means just a waste, just a pity. You know, when you look at somebody, unfortunately, you say, he has potential. Guess what? The situation is even worse when you might even say he had potential. I don't want to get into it now. So, you know, sometimes you look at a situation and you say, such a waste, such a waste. You know, this person could have dedicated his life to something greater than himself. And what is he doing? He's wasting his time with petty trivialities, you know. It's just such a pity when somebody is not utilizing his potential to the fullest. You know, you look at it and you just say, wow, it really pity, so unfortunate. That's the level of being asleep. But then the Rebbe says that there's the highest level in the neshama. No matter what's happening, it doesn't get dented at all. And that's the unbelievable stress of Chassidus. We just had it in the Yom Yom, for example, of Yud Aleph Shvat, where he says as follows. Why do we say, I'm not going to elaborate on this, but why do we say, Moidani biyadayim tmeyos, even though our hands are impure? Before Negel Wasser, the first thing in the morning we cry out, Moidani lefanecha melech chai v'kayim, shechzarta b'nishmasi b'chemla, Rabba munasecha. And the Rebbe writes over there in Ayim Yom from Yud Aleph Shvat, V'ameken zayn achose b'zeh, oder achose b'zeh, aber der Moidani von Aiden bleibt ganz. You could be lacking in this area, you could be lacking in another area, you could be deficient this way, deficient that way. But the Moidani, the part of you which cries out to gratitude and loyalty and connection and attachment to Hashem, der Moidani von Aiden bleibt ganz. It remains whole. That means nothing, absolutely nothing of this planet Earth, absolutely nothing of this planet Earth can cause even a dent or a scratch on the essence of your soul. It supersedes whatever. It's not the level of Ispashtus HaChochma, which over there could be something called Golos. It's not the level of Etzem HaChochma, where over there we could say it's asleep. But it's the level which is always, always, this is the essence of the quintessential of the neshama, which is always loyal and connected to Hashem. And this we saw so much since the war started, how it's been revealed by hundreds of thousands of Yidden and by millions in a surprising way. Like the hostage who came out and she wrote that her faith kept her strong and she kept on praying. And it's unimaginable, horrific conditions. But nevertheless, her Moidani was vibrant and alive, etc., etc. And this is really happening and is existing by every single Yid. To talk about the idea of kidnapping, I just want to go through some famous episodes and history and Jewish knowledge, so we should appreciate all the more what this is all about. So first of all, just for basic knowledge, there's the story of Dinah, the daughter of Yaakov, who was abducted in the story of Shechem, and everyone knows what happened over there, to what degree Shimon and Levi had to kill the entire city over there because they were guilty of kidnapping Dinah and violating, etc. Look up the story. But from that story alone, we're talking about one Jew, Dinah. And even though this Yaakov's was not so happy about it, but at the end of the day, obviously, Shimon and Levi did the right thing. And that's how you see how grave the sin of kidnapping is, etc. Then there's another story where many, many, many pages and many, many, many svarim talk about this, based on a Gemara about the brothers of Yosef, Yaakov's sons, that kidnapped Yosef. First they planned to kill him, and then they sold him as a slave. And then the implications of this for the rest of the history of the Jewish nation, all because of this act and the consequences of this act. And all the commentators speak about it because it's related to this concept of kidnapping. In any case, closer to our time, forget about what's going on right now. I'm not forgetting, but I'm saying in addition to what's going on right now, that the entire Yiddish nation is praying and pleading and turning to Hashem because of this hostile situation. But before that, in the 1800s, from 1827, I think, to 1850, there was the story of the Kantanistan. I don't know if you're familiar about it, but Lubavitcher Chassidim know about this very, very much. You could look it up, I'm sure, Google Kantanistan. It was a terrible, terrible decree that started in the times of the Mittler Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe. He spoke about it in a Hasidic discourse right before he passed away. And the Hasidic discourse is a famous discourse. It's called Lahaven Inyan Lekichas Anshe Chayil Mi Yisro Biyad Nochrim. It's a famous discourse. And he spoke about this idea. The Kantanistan, by the way, were Jewish children that were kidnapped, conscripted to fight as soldiers in the Russian army. Now, this was something which was supposed to be an equal tax on the entire population of Russia. But in the end of the day, the Jews were more targeted than others, number one. Number two, there were those, Rahman al-Islam, that really were working hard to make it worse for the Jews, they hired what was called chappers, Achmana litzlan, Jews that were completely assimilated, and they were hired to go into Jewish communities and Jewish places and literally kidnap children that were like 7, 8, 9 years old. Now these children, they went to like a school. This is what meant kantanistin, that they'd be a child, he'd be 8, 9, 10 years old. Then he went to a school, he was trained to be a soldier, but many, many times they were actually forced to convert. And then when they turned like 18, then they first joined the Russian army and they had to serve for like 25 years. Now this was such a terrible, terrible gzeira. The Mittler Rebbe, right in the Maimer that he said, and he wrote, he said his father, the Alter Rebbe, came to him and told him there's going to be such a decree. And the Mittler Rebbe knew about it in the last year of his life, and he found out about it. And actually, his passing, his estalkos, he passed away in a village called Nezhin. And what he was doing, he was on his way to travel to Haditch, to the Alter Rebbe, to pray at his father's resting place, which I don't know how many times in general after his father passed away, how many times he went there. It would be interesting to know. But in any case, he was on a journey to his father's resting place, the Alter Rebbe, to pray that this decree shouldn't be nullified. And on the way there, he passed away. So we see how terrible this decree was, that the Mittler Rebbe went on a journey to Haditch, to his father's resting place, to pray that it should be nullified, and he passed away. And then the Tzemach Tzedek, who is the Mittler Rebbe's nephew, but also his son-in-law, who became the next Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, in his years as a leader, there's many, many stories of his involvement in trying to save as many Jewish children as he could, and it was the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, who dealt with it. So from this we see that this idea of pidyon shvuyim, redeeming captives, is one of the greatest mitzvahs, and that's the opposite, that's the contrast of the Avera of kidnapping, and then there's the mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim. We all have to do in the mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim to redeem ourselves and to protect ourselves in the first place, that we should, as much as possible, diminish the concept of golus in our own service of Hashem. There are great, great many stories about this kantanistim, but we're running out of time, so I'll just quickly connect this to Chamisha Asher B'Shvat and Parshas Yisro. What is Chamisha Asher B'Shvat? Peiros. It's about the fruits. What's fruits? Fruits is the addition, what comes from our labors. We invest, and there's return, and there's dividends, and there's profits. That's all the fruits, which means fruits is addition, more. And that's exactly what Yisro is, more. Meloshin Yeser, as Rashi explains. So this is the lesson that we have to also tell each and every one of ourselves, that whatever the situation is, any one of us, that if there's such a thing, I'm talking to myself, if you made any mistakes in your life, and there was a situation of your own being kidnapped, you have to realize it's all so that through that should become more results, more dividend, more profit. You got better, stronger, in your serving Hashem, smarter. And that's what it means, Yisro, more. You know, there was once a conversation that me and my classmates were having. There's such a thing called Thursday Night Farbrengens. And there was a discussion about what's the number, say one word that would encapsulate everything the Rebbe stands for. So obviously, you know, the obvious word is Mashiach. The Rebbe is all about Mashiach. But then there was discussion back and forth, and someone else said a line, and we all agreed to it, that the word action also brings out what the Rebbe is, because in every single letter, in every single sikha, in the end of the day, it's about doing something. What comes out of it? No action. So I was thinking this week when I was learning Parshas Yisro, in a way there's another word that tells you exactly everything you have to know about the Rebbe. And what word is that? Yisro, more. Whoever you are, whatever situation you're in, whatever position you're in, Whatever your circumstances in life are, I have one thing to tell you. What the Rebbe is telling you, more productivity, more positivity, more light, more good, etc. The Rebbe should help. We should come to the ultimate more. The Yisro and Acheshech, this second, all the hostages should be free. This second, Mashiach should come, and we should be dancing with the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, with the Torah Chadasha Meiti Teitzei, with the Hayam Meil Neskarava Lenasim, we're re-experiencing Matan Torah this Shabbos, so we should all experience the Torah Chadasha Meiti Teitzei, the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, take it from Yad Mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.